You are now listening to the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Hello there, and welcome back to the official Deaf Crocodile Podcast. This is episode number 4, and with me this time, I've got Craig Rogers from Deaf Crocodile. Hello, Craig.
Hello.
And we got a special guest this time, one of Craig's longtime friends and somebody that he relies on for information, Mr. Mike Coronado. Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
This is a really interesting conversation we're going to have today. After we discuss the film that went up for pre-order today, we're going to talk about film restoration as a whole, answer some questions from social media, and just really lean into what happens with the restoration for those that don't understand what that means. Mike, since it's your first time here, can you explain what you do for everybody, some of your background?
Well, I started restoring film back in 2006, and currently I'm the lead restoration artist at Duplitech. And at Duplitech, we restore over 100 films a year. So some of our clients are Arrow, Shout, and Kino. Those are like the big three. And it's been a lot. Lately, it's just been a lot of 4K UHD discs. So definitely a higher standard of restoration. And that's pretty much it.
We'll get into that 4K versus Blu-ray on some restoration stuff later, I assume. But the big thing today is it is going to be the month of November next week. So we are here to discuss what is going up for pre-order for Deaf Crocodile, and that is the Irish film called The Outcasts. This is one that's been in the works for quite some time. Had this revealed earlier this year when BFI announced their copy, and Deaf Crocodile wanted to make sure that people were prepared to know that this was also coming out. Craig, tell us about The Outcasts.
It's Irish kind of folk horror. Very, very cool film. For me, the thing I love about this project is the director, Robert Wynne Simmons. He wrote Blood on Satan's Claw, and then he directed this, which I think was his first feature. But he then was telling us that he had had a bunch of little 8mm films that he had shot with his friends when he was a teenager. And he had sent us a DVD that he had made ages ago. Really rough quality, and we were still planning on, even if we had to, using that to put on the disc, because the stuff was so cool. Like what he did at such a young age, shot it all 8mm, and then created an audio track with his friends and put in sound effects. He put in music, all with like a tape recorder, and just eyeball, like trying to get it somewhat sort of in sync.
Right.
And even those early films, some of the stuff you can see, like he had some talent. Some of the camera work and stuff was really good. And then also, celebrities pop up in them. He did a short about this kid trying to get rid of a bomb, and everywhere he puts it, it ends up, he can't leave it there, so he has to take it, bring it somewhere else. And Sammy Davis Jr. It's like, and it's just like the camera like pans by and you see this guy for like a second. I'm like, what? And I went back. I'm like, wait a second. And I go back and I'm like, yeah, that's Sammy Davis Jr. That's crazy. So then one of the other shorts is a small, looks like it's an advertisement for cigarettes, and they got Charlton Heston and Peter O'Toole and like big name celebrities. And this is like peak career. Like looks like it's probably the early 60s, somewhere in that time period. And so they just quickly like take a cigarette out of the pack, and then they throw the pack, screen left, and then he has the next actor like catch it, and they just keep passing it around. And it is like It's amazing. So there's really cool 8mm shorts that are on this film as well. And then the Irish Film Institute did the restoration, and it was shot on 16mm, and it's really beautiful.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's a good package.
Yeah, I worked on one of the interviews for this, and I got to say the imagery in this movie is astounding. One, I can't wait for people to be able to watch if they have not seen the BFI release yet, because this is a unique movie. It's shot in a time that I mean, even just the imagery of Ireland as a whole, like, is beautiful to look at in the background. For those that were taken by like Banshees of Inisherin a couple years ago of the landscapes, you see a lot of that in this film, and it's a gorgeous movie. Really happy that you got your hands on this. What kind of extras do you got on this for everybody?
Yeah, also on the disc, as usual, we've got two great essays. One by Walter Chaw, who is on all of our releases because we love his work so much.
Right.
This second one is by Paul Duane. We have a visual essay by Rod Stoneman. Dennis, once again, has not one, but two interviews this time. A video interview with the director, Robert Wynne Simmons. And then we also got a very cool interview with the music composer for the film, Stephen Cooney, which was a kind of a fun get. It was a guy I play tennis with. I happened to mention we were working on this film, and he's like, "Oh, I know the guy that did the music." Like, because he's Irish, so obviously you know him.
Right.
And so, yeah, he got us an email address, and we reached out. And so, yeah, we got this great interview with the composer. And it's really, really interesting hearing him talk about the limitations he had. And so that created kind of some of the sounds and stuff that he used were because he didn't have a big budget and a big, score to work with. So it's a great interview. The limited edition has cover art by Andy Ferrari. I was looking online at just trying to find some artists that worked and had done some cool, just Irish folklore kind of artwork, and I came across her work. And so she's doing this beautiful pencil drawing. It's a wraparound cover, and it's not going to be color. It's just going to be the pencil drawing, and it's really gorgeous.
Nice.
And then Beth Morris, who does all our graphic design, she'll be doing the standard edition cover and the booklet, and she handles all the other stuff for us, and she's always terrific. And then, like I said, I mentioned the 8mm shorts from Robert. And then on top of that, we have, he did a short film, another 16mm film called The Judgment of Albion, that it will be on there as well. And I think that was also restored by the Irish Film Institute. So yeah, it's a lot of stuff on this one.
Incredible. And I mean, a lot of context behind somebody that was literally like monumental in the folk horror movement worldwide. Like this is one of the individuals that people cite as kind of finding this genre and popularizing it. So I'm glad that you were able to get this. I think a lot of other labels would not have gone as far into it as you have. This is going to be a solid release. Up for pre-order now, Diabolic, everywhere you get your physical media. Go check it out. On top of all that, you can still buy it direct. Support Deaf Crocodile as usual. Anything else about The Outcasts?
I'm just excited for people to see it, and it's kind of funny. It's like, a lot of I've heard things about some labels that are like infighting, and it's just kind of silly. Like BFI reached out to us, and we've been talking about their release and our release, and they even sent us a couple of copies of their release we got the other day, and they're like, they're excited for ours to come out. So it's like, yeah, like, work together, guys.
Yeah, I would hope most labels could do that.
Yeah, it's too hard. It's too difficult to add infighting to the mix.
Right. Well, let's get into our restoration discussion. Before we get into some of our questions, just over the last couple of years, Mike, can you tell us some of the films that you've been able to work on that have been released through some other labels?
He did say 100 a we're
just some of the bigger ones that you're proud of.
Just recently, JFK was one that I was really proud of.
Nice.
Unicorn. We worked on Halloween 1, 2, and 3, so that was really cool. There's one that I did for Kino. I think it was Paths to Glory. That one was a fun restoration project. It has a lot of memories behind that one. And yeah, I keep on going.
That's some primo titles.
It's a big deal. I mean, when you can look on your resume and say I worked on a Kubrick film and frickin' Halloween, like how do you feel about that at the end of the day? Going home and seeing that you were able to craft some of these masterworks.
It's definitely a great feeling. Like just recently, we just watched Child's Play with the kids, and they're like, I was looking. Well, I made the mistake of streaming it, and I was like, well, proud of it. Yeah, you guys are going to see this new restoration that your dad worked on. And then we start seeing all this dirt all over the place, and we're like, oh, wait a minute, I should have just got the disc out. But I'm just so happy because they're so used to, they're young and they're all on YouTube half the time. So just kind of showing them that now they realize like what I'm doing and what's the importance of restoration, and they kind of now they're seeing the dirt, so they kind of understand like, all right, this is not, that didn't work on this one, so.
Yeah, that's a big deal. The difference, in streaming and disc is not just necessarily if the restoration's up to date, but compression and artifacting and all that other stuff that comes into play when you're talking about lower bit rates. But man, restoration work as a whole, I would love to hear. First off, as a baseline, how do you define film restoration, Craig? Because a lot of people, they say that word flippantly without knowing what that phrase as a whole means.
Yeah, for me, it's it's two different. There's film preservation and there's film restoration, and they're two very different, very important things. And this is just my own opinion and definition of what that is. There's going to be 1,000 different definitions depending on the 1,000 different people you ask. So, but in my opinion, preservation is usually handled by the museums and archives, and they're keeping the film elements alive and safe, and they will do photochemical cleanup, as best they can, and that makes sure that those elements stay safe and don't deteriorate. Which is extremely important. Restoration in modern definition is essentially digital restoration. There really isn't any analog so much anymore, because it's like that's what they're doing at the archives.
Right.
We'll try to get from them the best element they have. And that's the starting point for us. So we scan that and then start the process of cleanup and scratch and deflicker and stabilization and color grading and trying to get it back to, in my opinion, the goal is to get it back to opening night show print. So it should still look like film, and you still want it to look like it would have looked like then. So, there's always the controversy over color grading, because that's the easiest thing and most subjective thing to look at. And I've noticed even some of the elements we've gotten from other places, have that kind of cyan cast to them. And I'm just like, no, like this film was from the 50s. So yeah, sometimes even then I'll tweak the color a little bit if it's looking a little too, cyan orange. So that's for me. That's the difference is the preservation is keeping the elements in the best condition and safest, and then the digital restoration is the handoff from there on. It's getting it to what we're doing mostly is for, making new prints or making, discs, or, hopefully so streaming places are streaming the restored stuff. But as Michael just pointed out, not always. And I've had a couple of people reach out to us. They're like, hey, I saw this film of yours is streaming on such and such. Is that your restoration, or is that like some other thing? And so far, yeah, if it's streaming, it's our restoration. So, but yeah, I've done that before. I'm like, oh, it's easier. I'll just stream it. And then I put it on and I'm like, what is this? I'm like, this is garbage. And I'm like, oh, God. So a lot of times, even if I don't have the disc, I'll just turn it off. I'm like, I'll just buy the discs and watch it later then. Like it's, right. And like, Michael was saying, it's like your kids were like, oh yeah, Dad didn't fix this one. And it's fun. It's, like when I have friends, and if we see something and they're like, it clearly needs a restoration, they're always just like, Craig, come on, like fix this. I'm like, hey, this is a studio title. We're not there yet.
Michael, with Duplitech working on all these, what is the average length of time from like ingestion of a scan to a fully restored film? Obviously, if you're doing 100 a year, that implies you work incredibly quickly.
Yes, it's very fast paced, and I started back in 2018, but we have that core group still at Duplitech. So we got pretty much the freedom just to figure out what's the most efficient way. There was like really no previous workflow the restoration. So like we all kind of we're always constantly communicating. It's so we're always just cranking things out. Like we got it streamlined down. So from scanning, once it's done scanning, I start working off like the full AP, and I can start restoring. And at the same time, Conform's working on it. They could get a file out to color, and everyone's kind of just working, like depending on if it needs deflicker or if it needs some sort of stabilization, that kind of slows down color. But once they have a restored file, usually takes my team anywhere from a week to 2 weeks to restore something. And we just have so like there's a few of us working at the same time. Like I found out a way where we could kind of just split up different reels, and everyone's just cranking it out. And by the time we get into color, it's just we turn things around really quick, and that's like what we take pride on. But like how you're saying, like how did I feel to work on two titles that like Halloween and Past Glory, and sometimes I don't take time to really celebrate that. Like it's always on to the next project. So we're always on to the next thing. So it's like when we started looking back at the titles, we're like, wow, I can't believe we worked on all that. And we started mixing up the years we're working on certain titles. But it's very fast paced. It's really difficult for new artists to come in and try to keep up with this. But we've just been doing it for so many years. It's like we got everything down.
That is, I mean, I hate to say it, but like for anybody that doesn't know the restoration process, that's like a breakneck speed on some of these titles. You have individuals working at a restoration house, and they're like, yeah, we worked on this one for 2.5 months because they were the only one doing it. And a week to 2 weeks is crazy pants numbers.
Yeah. And it's like certain titles like JFK, that one took a lot longer, but like some of the other titles.
I was assuming that one's got to be tricky because there's so many different formats and so much fast cutting, and there isn't a steady shot in there, is there? Like, that's which if anyone's listening and doesn't know why that makes a difference, the software is looking for differences from frame to frame. So if there's a lot of movement, you're going to get a lot of false positives, which slows the process down incredibly. So, like, back in the Cinelicious days when we were working on Death Valley days, like we restored like all 30 years of that thing. But the reason that could go fairly quickly is like almost the entire show, every episode, every shot was locked off. So it made the process so much faster. Like every once in a while, you'll have some, a little bit of action or something, a horse running or something. But a lot of the stuff was just talking heads locked off camera. So much faster.
I love that.
More of that, please.
One thing about this process that a lot of people don't know the difference between is before it even gets to your hands, the whole scanning process. There are different scanners that are used out there depending on where it's being scanned, who is scanning it. Hate to phrase it like this, but like how much money the place that's scanning it has, because if they can afford a better scanner, you're going to get a better product. Can you, Michael, share the difference between the scanners and some of the things that you can see on a finished product that shows that it was scanned in an inferior way?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like even for the restoration process, I really like the Laser Graphics Director. That's a scanner that it seems like I don't get those warps on the first like frame and last frame.
Yeah. That scanner's the gold standard.
Yeah. So just even you get like sometimes if it's the OCN, you would get like a nice grain pattern, hardly any like deflicker. You have to get makes the settings a lot lighter, and yeah, I could tell the difference if it's not scanned on laser graphics. It's I'm cleaning every warp, and that just takes so much time. And that's most of our titles everything's scanned through laser graphics at Duplitech, so that's kind of eliminates all the dewarping for my team. Nice. And it just back in early 2000s, that was like always a headache. Like every post facility I was working at, it was like, all right, you do a dirt pass, but you have to fix all the warps. And it's like, oh man, it slows down the whole restoration process. You're working on a tight budget and you're just taking so much time just fixing warps. It could be a difficult fix.
A lot of times some scanners that don't like splices, so the first frame and last frame will be out of focus, or it's stretching. If you can get your project scanned on the director, do it. It's worth the extra. The money you're going to spend, the money you're going to save scanning it on a cheaper scanner, you're going to end up paying more than that because the restoration is going to take longer, and that's the biggest cost anyway. So just pony up for the good scan, please.
And there are some films, especially now, that you can see what I know as scanner lines in a finished product. You can see, usually it's vertical lines running in like daylight scenes really can show them quite often. Do you guys know what causes those if the scan comes in bad like that?
A bad scanner.
Yep.
Because what you're kind of seeing is the pattern on the sensor that's doing the scanning.
Right.
I don't want to throw around names, but there's one particular scanner that's very popular because it's very inexpensive. And yeah, I ask up front, like when we're getting elements, I'm like, what was this scanned on? And if that name comes up, I'm like, oh. Because I actually worked on a project for a friend who, this was just something they wanted to do because they liked the movie and had access to a print. And it was their brothers, and one of them was working at a facility that had access to a good scanner. And so he scanned 2 of the reels there at work, but then he couldn't scan the rest of it there. And so the rest of it got scanned on this other scanner. And when I was working on the restoration, I'm going from, working on a reel, then I get to the next reel. And I didn't realize they were scanned on different scanners. And I contacted him, I was like, I think you got a bad scan here. Something's not right. Like the chroma, the gamma on the colors out of whack. Like it's just really bad. Like you probably want to rescan that reel. And he explained to me, he's like, no, that was scanned on X scanner. And I'm like, you get what you pay for.
Yeah, that checks out. I really just wanted people to understand that there's, things that are inherent in the process sometimes before the restoration even starts that makes some of these errors stick out. And
the scan is paramount. Like it is
exactly.
Like it's everything we're working with comes from that scan. So, before it gets scanned, the prep of the element, like clean it as best as possible. Like the more you can get off of it just through cleaning the physical element, the better, and then use a good scanner. Like we'll be able to give you a much better product if you give us better ingredients. It's like cooking, it's like you give us a basket full of crap, you're going to get, a meal, but it's going to be made from crap.
Oh, that's a pretty good way to put it. I like that. We've talked about the overall restoration process and some of the things that go into it, and we had a few questions like that that we got through social media. So one of them that sort of goes into this is length of time. I already asked Mike how Duplitech is doing it. Craig, what is the longest restoration you've had to work on so far?
Well, it's kind of cheating, but Satan Tango. It
was
7.5 hours long, and I was kind of doing it solo. So
let's say Deaf Crocodile releases so far.
Deaf Crocodile releases.
Because Satan Tango is definitely cheating.
Solomon King. Because that started with a very rough element, because that's the only element that existed.
Right.
Tyler Fagerstrom, who Michael knows from our Sinalicious days, just worked wonders saving that print's color. Which interestingly, prior to that, we had done the 4K restoration of Assault on Precinct 13. And anyone listening, I don't know when it's coming out. I wish I knew. We only handled the restoration. So
Deaf Crocodile's not releasing it.
We're not releasing it.
It.
Or it would have been out a long time ago. But there was there's one scene that for the longest time, any release you see of that, there's the head of, I think there's I can't remember what reel it was, but the head of one of the reels was completely destroyed in the lab. The original negative was split right down the middle when they were making release prints back when it was first released, which should never have happened because they shouldn't have been making release prints from the original negative, but they did, and they ruined the negative. So way back then, they had to make a duplicate section by making an optical negative from a print. So going all the way back to when it was first released, you get to this section of the film and the image quality goes right down. So when we were doing the restoration, we had the original negative to work from. So everything was looking great. And then we get to this section. And we're like, all right, is there anything we can do to make this look better? Because, the grain just doubles in size and the image gets softer and it's noticeable. So the producer of the film had one of those original prints that was printed from the original negative. So that's the highest quality element of that section of the film that exists.
Right.
Unfortunately, it had faded pink. So we scanned both, and we were playing around like what's the best way to do this. And it was interesting that I was like kicking around the idea. I'm like, I don't even know if this is possible, but could we scan both elements and then use the color from the dupe, but the resolution from the print? And so I called Tyler, and I'm like, Tyler, I pitched this idea to him. He's like, I was actually just trying that. And he's like, it's working. So that section we're pretty proud, like, looks better than it's ever looked, other than the handful of prints that were made before it got destroyed.
Right.
But I tell you this story to go to Solomon King. So Tyler was working a lot on how can he get some color out of this print that was so faded. And then not long after that, the next project was Solomon King. And I'm like, hey, Tyler, remember that little section that was completely faded? We got a whole entire film now. So he was able to apply a lot that he learned of like how to coax some color out of a completely faded print. Wow. And so our first thing we did was we needed to do a test. We've got a little section, which I think we've got a YouTube video of that restoration. That was the first test we did to see, like, can we even do this? And we're like, holy cow, Tyler's a genius. But even then, about probably halfway through the process, we were, as good as it looked, there were still elements, green in particular, had some really bad, like, blue chromatic like noise in it. And about halfway through the process, Tyler's like, hey, I've been just trying to get this to, look better. He's like, I got to know another way to do it. So he's like, I'm going to regrade. And so it looked even better. So like how he got Solomon King to look like it does color wise is a miracle. I'm so amazed by that. But then my job was also like, it was beat up. So there was a lot of dirt and scratches and splices. And, I mean, for the genre of the film, like there's just, it's a independently made, by a non-filmmaker. So that there's some odd cuts already in there, so that helped. Like when we were like, oh, there's just a splice there, a jump cut, because it just broke there apparently. You get away with a little easier with a film that's already got some odd edits in it. Right. But yeah, that was a long process. That was a long answer.
I can't imagine the process. I'm glad you brought up the YouTube video because I was going to reference it after that. Just showing how it came into your hands after the scan and what was able to be accomplished with that first pass is night and day, and something that I think some of the more major restorations would probably do better to have a featurette or some sort of, I hate to use the term, but like sizzle reel on the disc when it comes out to show how much work went into it and what it was like beforehand. That might inspire some more people to understand film preservation and how much work they are appreciating through film restoration. But obviously, that's not always entirely feasible.
Well, I mean, I always kind of wish that we could do that for like every film, like just do some sort of short restoration thing. But we're just trying to finish the restoration in time to get it to David, to get it to manufacturing. Like we barely make that deadline. Sometimes don't. There's no time to do it. I just don't have the time to make it. So we've got some stuff. Hopefully, maybe with Felly Day, it won't be on the disc, but we might. Talking to Tyler, try and put something together that we can just share as like promo material, but it's happening, after the fact. So it's not going to be on the disc. It's just not possible.
Totally get it. I mean, it's a lot of work already that you're doing, clearly, from what we're hearing.
And I have to say, when we were at Cinelicious again, worked in a project for Classic Flicks, a Fritz Lang film called You Only Live Once. And I mean, they specialize in public domain films, and usually, they find a print, they can do the best they can with what they got. And so they had given us that one to restore. And that one was another one that was rough. That was a really rough print. And we did create a little before and after that we gave him, and he actually put it on the disc. And I remember reading one of the reviews for the disc was saying like they were going to kind of ding it on picture quality. And like, then I saw in the bonus features, like where it started from. And he was like, no, this is kind of amazing.
Exactly what I meant for further appreciation on these. Hearing about all the work that goes into it, I share a question that you got from Dogzillo on Instagram, which is, when I think of the high level of film restoration that you all do, I'm overwhelmed by the idea of how tedious the work likely is. How do you stay sane while doing this kind of painstaking work? Do you listen to podcasts, audiobooks, music, or anything else? Do you have to remember to get up and walk around? Michael, tell us about the process. What do you do to keep yourself sane while you're doing this?
I just love it so much that it doesn't really, time goes by so fast. Like, especially when we have like these tight deadlines, and I know like Craig was saying, like he has to deliver that product, so he's working around the clock, probably staying up all night. And you can see that, as he just said right now, that really shows how much dedication goes into those discs. Because like for other post facilities, you're kind of just maybe only got like a certain amount of hours you could dedicate to a restoration, where Craig could just have a delivery date, so he could work day and night. And it sounds like he's really putting like the most into his restorations, and which really separates Deaf Crocodile from a lot of labels. But from what I do to kind of keep myself motivated and like make sure like I just listen to music, podcasts. I really enjoy just the team I'm working with. So most of the time we have our headphones off. That's like something that's a little different than other post facilities I worked at, where we're just chatting, like just talking about movies, just about life, and just having those conversations. Like it's just a really good environment, and we just want to keep that going. So we just make sure whoever comes into the room, like kind of vibes with the rest of the group. And so that way, like everyone's just motivated to come to work every day. But yeah, I would say podcast and music is probably the two things we do when we do have our headphones on.
Any podcasts or favorite bands you want to shout out?
It's Deaf Crocodile Podcast.
What a kiss ass.
I know, geez, there's only been 2 episodes.
Like early days.
Sorry, I was just saying, wanted to comment on, like, he's talking about, like, keeping your headphones off and just vibing with the people in the room. Like, that's definitely one of the things I miss working on my own, and not just from the social aspect of it, but also just for the end result of the product. Like, everyone comes at a problem differently. And when you're the only one in the room, I don't have any input from anybody else. I'm like, I know Michael, like when we were working on Belladonna of Sadness, like I had this problem, and I'm like, this is going to be rough. I'm like, Michael. And like, he knocked it out in like no time. I'm like, dude.
Right.
Like, yeah. So it's like, it's just really great. Like, yeah, you want to get along. Obviously it makes the day go by faster, and you can have fun conversations but also, like, you can bounce ideas off each other. And like, if you're having a problem, like someone else it's not a problem for them. Like, oh yeah, just do this, and it's like, yeah, that's awesome that you get to work with a group environment like that. That's awesome. And like he said, as far as, not going insane, we're probably already insane. That's why we like this. Like, because yeah, it's I kind of you kind of get, like he said, the time goes by so fast. Like, I'm working on a reel, and I'm like plugging away, and like, Roger will come to the door. He's like, "Hey, like, you gonna stop working?" And I'm like, "What?" And I look at the clock, and I'm like, "Oh, it's like last night." He's like, "It's 2 a.m." I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm almost done." Yeah, the time just evaporates.
Yeah, it's really strange. Like, you get locked into the zone where it's like a meditative state where everything is like you're just looking at every frame, every shot, and you're kind of just seeing the problem and fixing it. And you could just, like, you don't really lose your concentration. And next thing you know, you're done with the reel. And it's like, all right, yeah, stand up now. So
And then if you, like, when you do, like, yeah, it's like any other thing people are doing. Like you get in the zone, like it is tedious and it does take a long time. So if you're in the zone, you're at like peak productivity. Like you don't want anything getting you out of that zone because this takes a long time. Like if you're going good, just keep going.
We got a lot of questions. I'm going to try to logically flow through some of these, but one of these I probably should have asked a little earlier, so I'm going to ask this now. It seems like the obvious question. Knickknack01 on the Blu-ray.com forums, and I'm going to read this verbatim and then talk about it for just a second. He says, for someone hoping to get into film restoration, especially if they're passionate about film preservation, I'm curious what advice you would offer them. And now that we've heard, the different definitions between film preservation and film restoration, it seems like those are two different areas that you might prepare for differently. So, Michael, how do you think somebody should prepare for what you do now? Is there something that they can do to work alongside you at Duplitech?
Always reach out to me. Like I'm always willing to share my knowledge and just point them in the right direction. Nowadays it's so easy just to FilmWorks. They have online classrooms and you could learn so much from there. They have master trainers and, even the software companies are willing to train people future artists, just to use their softwares. So it's definitely just having the whole social media and it's very different than it was before. I felt like you had to know someone to get you in. And it was all right, if you want to go work somewhere else or be part of another team, you have to get a referral. But I feel like now there's a big need for artists, and the information's out there. You just got to just look it up and if you have any questions, you could just hit me up on LinkedIn or on Instagram, whatever. And I always have ways to help. Even if some labels kind of reach out to you and hey, I have this problem with. All Craig was saying, I just don't know how to fix this. I'll tell them, all right, just try using this software and use this tool, and it's going to correct that issue. And they'll get back to me, all right, it worked. And I just know that's a great feeling, just helping others that are really passionate about restoration, stuff like that, because it motivates me more to keep doing it, keep restoring stuff and just sharing my knowledge for the future. Because I just don't want people think it's just an AI thing where you could just flip a switch and these films are restoring themselves.
What is your handle on Instagram so they can find you?
It's actually, I think it's Coronado_Mike.
That's pretty easy to remember. Craig, any other advice, or you want to speak on the preservation side? Anything that you know on that?
Yeah, essentially the preservation side, like I said, is usually archives, museums, and they put a larger emphasis on academia and having a degree and so if that's the area you want to go, it's working at an archive or working at a museum and preserving the elements. You probably should look into getting some formal education and getting a degree. If you want to work in the digital restoration end, like what we're doing, just find a facility that's doing that work, and you start at the beginning, and they'll train you. And like Michael said, FilmWorks. We use Phoenix for restoration, which is, I don't know. Do they still call it Digital Vision, or have they just completely gone to FilmWorks?
It's FilmWorks.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it used to be called Digital Vision. They put out Phoenix, and now it's FilmWorks. It's the same software. But yeah, and there's other software, and most of those companies are definitely happy to help you because they want you to buy their software. So, and it is a pretty steep learning curve. If you just plunk down in front of it, you're going to be yeah, how do you start this? But it's a lot of software that's been around a long time. Even the Adobe products, no one person is an expert at all of it, because there's just so much you can do, and so many. It's teams of people over decades have been building this thing. So yeah, there's no one person's going to know how to do everything. So, it's good to again, be in a room with multiple people because they're going to know different things. That's important.
Super nerdy, comprehensive question just from me. Could you try to list just all of the software that you use for film restoration if somebody wanted to look into that?
Oh yeah,
You go first.
First. All right, I use PF Clean. That's from Pixel Farm. Viva Algosoft. Filmworks Phoenix. And MTI Nova.
Any additional there, Craig?
Yeah, I use a lot of the Adobe stuff. So I use Filmworks Phoenix as the core restoration tool I use. I've used Resolve, DaVinci Resolve. Has a pretty good stabilization tool, so sometimes I'll use that just for stabilization if I have to. I know Tyler uses that for the color grading. Premiere I use a lot, but also I'm kind of doing a different thing than Michael is. He's like very focused on just the restoration, and like I need to do the conform and the trailers and like right. So I'm like. And a lot of titles, if they don't need like major corrective restoration on the audio, I'm bringing it into Isotope and I'm dehissing and getting rid of clicks and I'm doing audio cleanup and so Adobe products, Isotope for audio, even Audition sometimes if I need to. Like the other day, I needed to create a 5.1 mix from separate elements, and I was like, I don't know how to do this, but watched a couple of YouTube videos, and I'm like, oh, I did it. But yeah, there's just a ton of any tool that gets the job done.
We've got a couple interesting questions that are kind of tied together here from one person. Alejandro Vidal Charis on Facebook wants to know, this is really funny, are there films that you've worked on the restoration for that you just plain dislike or didn't care for? So essentially, does the film that you're working on, do you feel like you have to enjoy the film or be passionate about it to even restore it?
It helps.
Yeah, it does help.
It feels, you were talking about how do you do it? It's so tedious that you don't notice the tedious when you love the project you're working on. When you're doing the same exact job, but on something you do not like, it's a lot more tedious.
That makes sense. And then attached to that, is there a project that you were on that you put in tons of time for and all of your resources? You go through all this restoration, and then by the end of it, you just weren't happy with the result. Is there any time that's happened for you, Michael?
There's been times where maybe the budget ran out and we're out of budget, and I just want to keep on going, and I just feel like it wasn't completely finished. Like I just, they took it away from me. They're like, all right, this looks good, but I know I could have done so much more. That happens a few times, and that's where, that's how I could relate to that question. But I do remember when I used to work on features, like if the color grade used to change, you just wipe out all our fixes, and we have to redo everything all over again and reapply those fixes and go through the fixes tree. So just wanting to go home, or like it's the weekend, you're working like 6 days a week, and you're just totally done with this project, and you have to redo like row 1 or row 4, and it was all because like the color grade changed.
Jeez. On that note, Craig, this is from Jim Verhoeven on Facebook. Is there something that you've tried to restore, or you got access to the elements and they looked good, like they looked like you were going to be able to use them, but when you got into the process and you were, deep in the throes of it, you were just for some reason unable to finish the actual restoration? Is that something that happens?
I'm trying to think. No, I mean, we don't get, you're going to know that pretty quick. Like, you're not going to get deep into a project and then go, oh, this element's not going to work. Like, you kind of know that up front. And that's happened before, where we were like, oh, we're going to do this project and it's great. And you get the element, you're like, oh, I guess we're not doing that project. Luckily, we got an upcoming project where we were very excited. Dennis particularly was very excited because he's a fan of this film. And they sent me the element, and I felt bad, but I told Dennis, I'm like, we can't use this. I was like, this is like a bad telecine. Like this is not we can't use this as a source element. Like it'll, I'll spend all the time and at the end it'll look like garbage. And it was one of the rare times when we went back to the archive and we're like, yeah, sorry, we can't use this. And they're like, oh, we'll scan it, new scan for you. And they gave us a beautiful new scan. And I was like, oh, fantastic.
There you go.
But yeah, a lot of times, the archives are very limited to what they can provide. It's like, this is what we got. Sorry. Because they have usually extremely tight budgets and they have a schedule of like, this is what we're going to be scanning this year. And they plan it out, like a year ahead. Like this is what we're doing in this year. So yeah, you get somebody tells you, oh, I need this done. Like they can't do it. So it was great that they were able to actually do a new scan of something. It's not usually the case. Right.
One thing that I think people would love to hear, and I know this is going to be an involved answer, so I apologize in advance. VHS Podcast on Twitter wants to know if you could walk through one of your releases just to get a full appreciation of the great lengths that you have to go through to get this film acquired, released, whatnot. Considering that next month episode, when we're finally talking about Felidae, any chance you want to talk about that one since you restored that one?
Yeah, honestly, the longest process of Felidae was getting the contract signed. That went on, God, it's got to be a couple of years of back and forth on that. But yeah, once we finally got the contract signed, it did take a while before we finally got the elements were sent off to the lab in Germany, and then they once we got them in hand, that's I don't know about you, Michael, but the most exciting part of a project is once you've got the new scan installed, on the drives, is looking at what we got, like what are we working with here. That's the most exciting part for me. I just love it. So we had the scans of Felidae, and I knew pretty quick. I'm like, this is going to be so good. But yeah, so yeah, the negotiations, and a lot of times it's not a matter of like, you say negotiations, it's not like you're going back and forth, like arguing over this bit and that bit and the other. It's a lot of times it's just like you send an email and you don't hear back for 3 months.
Because Europeans are on holiday always.
So like every email, is like a 6 months exchange of like getting a reply back. So, but yeah, and then so get it signed, get it scanned, and then I don't know. Everyone has a different process, and Michael's it sounds like they've got down to a science with a team of people working on multiple things simultaneously, which I'm very jealous of. But yeah, so for me, it's usually the first thing is stabilization, because having it steady helps the algorithm, see things. You don't want it seeing things moving that aren't supposed to be moving because it might remove it. Right. So stabilization is the first thing for me, and then a lot of times I've got a workflow with Tyler that works out well. Is once I've got this image stabilized, I send him those files. He starts color grading, and then I'm working cleaning up, and as I finish a reel, I'll send him the restored reel, and he'll just swap out his source from the stabilized to the now cleaned, because that's not really going to affect his grade, so that we can both be kind of working simultaneously. And then then I'm usually the slowest part. So once the cleanup is done, he'll then send me back, files that are color graded. He sends me, I QC, he sends me files and I can watch and QC the color grade. I give him notes, to change this, tweak that. This looks great. That needs a little brighter. There's just color grading notes. And he'll update those. And then once that looks good, we'll have a ProRes file that's restored, color graded, and that goes off to David McKenzie, and then he does his magic, making sure it stays looking good.
And all while you're doing that, of course, you are helping produce extras. You're getting people in touch for art design, approving some of those elements, getting people to work on subtitles and everything, of course.
Yep. Subtitles are the worst. I know they're so important, but they're so easy that things are just wrong, and the problem is like, especially when you're doing, it's not just like an English SDH for an English language film, but if it's a translated film, I don't know if it's wrong.
Right.
I don't speak that language. So it's like, sometimes you just have to look, you're like, that doesn't sound right. Like that doesn't seem like that's the right grammar or something. And you have to check. But yeah, that's one that's because I've got so many other things going on. That's the one that we're like, if I have to spend, hours and hours, QCing and fixing subtitle files, that's the one where I'm just pulling my hair out. I'm like, I ain't got time for this.
Yeah, we talked about the restoration being tedious. Anything I've done with subtitles has been incredibly tedious.
It is, and especially the particularly the streaming, all the different streaming outlets have these very, very specific QC standards for subtitles. Like if a subtitle is a frame too late or too long, or if it's on screen too long or too short, they'll just reject it. And it's like, I'm like, this has been screened theatrically. It's been out on Blu-ray. Like, there's nobody has had a problem with this. And they're just like, no, we need a new subtitle file. And I'm like, well, then you're not streaming our title. Like, we don't have another subtitle file.
That's crazy pants.
Yeah.
Wow, I did not know that was that stringent. There is, so much about film preservation and stuff. I think I remember you telling me about Felidae was already starting to deteriorate, right? When it got scanned?
The lab told us that when they open the cans, so the smell of vinegar kind of hit them, which, yeah, it's 30 years old, but by film standards, that's not a terribly old movie,
right?
Which just means it wasn't probably stored properly the whole time. Like, at some point, it was probably in a place that wasn't temperature controlled.
Of course.
Or it was probably too dry or too moist, or the humidity wasn't right. It just wasn't stored properly for at some point. But it didn't really affect the scans. Like the scans turned out really good.
We talked about him earlier. Nick Knack on the Blu-ray.com forum wants to know, like, are there any of these that you've been involved in the process where you've needed to give further advice to the owners for how to preserve that film? Or do you have any sort of authority to, implement measures to protect those yourselves in any of these processes?
Well, yeah, we certainly don't have the authority, but if somebody's been keeping, Solomon King, like, the UCLA Film and Television Archive had that print, but the audio we used came from Belinda, who had the original audio, 35 millimeter audio tracks in her closet, in her home. And all these years thought it was the original negative. because it's, it's 35 millimeter. She just assumed that must be the negative. But yeah, once we had that scanned and we told her, I'm like, well, the archive's got the print. Like, we should really keep this all together. All the elements that you have should just be kept together at the archive so they're safe. And so, yeah, she agreed. And so that's there. And that's usually our advice anytime if someone's been storing something, in their shed or in their home or just somewhere not safe. It's usually a film archive will very happily store it for them to make sure it stays preserved. Because again, like I said, that's their business, is keeping this stuff safe. That's what they do. And so if there's a film that is in danger of deteriorating because of bad storage, they'll usually be happy to take it from you and make sure it stays safe.
The amount of space in some of these places has to be intense.
It's like that Raiders of the Lost Ark shot,
Right.
It's like, except they're very organized. It's not going to get lost. They know exactly where it is.
That's a good point. I mean, there's certain films that I know that some other labels are wanting to work on, and since they, started discussing, they realized, we can't find the negative at all now. And a lot of other countries, that's been a problem, it seems like.
It is amazing. Like, I've said this before over the years, but, and everyone talks about a lost film, and everyone always thinks that, silent era, like all these films have been lost. There's stuff very recent where elements are gone. Like,
right.
When we did Private Property, that had been considered a lost film for 40 years, and that was shot in the 60s. Jeez. It just disappeared. They accidentally kind of stumbled across it in UCLA when they were going through some other cans, and they're like, Private Property, isn't that film that's been missing? We're like, it's not missing anymore. But what happens a lot of times, we've had problems where different facilities will shut down, and they've got all this material. And, over time, you think of your contact list. Do people have the same address or phone number from 30, 40 years ago? Probably not. And that's the only contact information they have. And they've got all this material. And they're like, we don't know what to do with it. We can't reach out to the people. So in some cases, probably some of it ends up getting thrown away, or other cases, they'll be like, here's a bunch of stuff, and they'll give it to a different archive or a different facility. I'm like, can you store this? And they literally have, massive amounts of material that they know this belongs to somebody, and they're just hoping at some point somebody reaches out and is like, hey, we're looking for this. And they're like, oh, thank God. At least now we know who it belongs to.
Right. One more very specific question about film restoration from the list. Michael, is there a film that you consider like your white whale of restoration? Anything that you would leap at the chance to be able to restore yourself?
Oh, yeah. Dark Crystal. That's for a while I thought I was going to have a chance to work on it, but it didn't happen. So I know when I found out I was going to restore it, I was like so bummed out. But yeah, that's my title right there.
You a Henson fan overall?
Oh yes, for sure.
It's good to hear. Glad I'm around kinfolk there. Craig, what is your white whale title?
Well, much like Michael, there's been a couple I really had my heart set on that have since come out with somebody else has done the restoration, which I'm always like, I'm glad it got done. But at the same time, I really wanted to do that. The latest being Happiness. Like that was been at the top of my wish list for a long time. So I'm glad it happened and it's coming out, but I really would have liked to have been involved in that one. But then as far as like the white whale, it's anything in Prince's vault in Minnesota. and
I should have
anything,
known that.
like anything. I read somewhere at some point, I heard that there was like a black and white 35 millimeter concert footage from the Controversy tour. Like, is it? And I'm like, I don't know if that's true, but if it is, like, Deaf Crocodile might need to shut down for like 6 months because that would have to be done. Like, yeah. So yeah, anything out of Prince's vault would be a dream come true.
That's a good answer. I'm sure that would look incredible. Is there any like common misconceptions about film restoration, Mike? Anything that you've heard people say, or something that you think people commonly get wrong?
I hate when like people just say, "Oh, you just clean dirt." Like, there's a lot more that goes into it. You know, like Craig was saying, stabilization, deflicker, and we might just make it seem easy, but it is a craft that we dedicate our lives to, and it's not as simple as like we could just replace it with AI or
James Cameron showed the world what that looks like.
Well, and you guys are perfect, because literally the next thing I was going to segue into is the AI, like white elephant in the room at the moment. Everybody that sees anything where there's either a less amount of grain than they think should be there, or something that they think just looks off, immediately questions if this was this is like a direct quote I've seen elsewhere, a film restoration done by AI. How is that affecting the industry right now? Is that something that a lot of us should actually be worried about?
I haven't seen any restoration tools that really have AI built into it. There's a lot of automated tools. There's a lot of automation, which the artist is kind of driving the tools and putting the parameters and kind of shaping out stuff, so we're not creating a bunch of artifacts and stuff like that. I've seen some test software that's, we ran a few samples with, and it just did a horrible job. And I think those companies are realizing, like, wait a minute, like, there's already software companies that already been developing for over like 20, 30 years. So they kind of just abandoned that project.
Right.
I've been seeing some like machine learning stuff like from on Nuke, and I just don't think like it's going to be a very like maybe like another like 10, 20 years before we actually have AI tools in our software. But even then, there has to be someone guiding it and making sure it's doing the right thing. You can't just be removing raindrops, or even with JFK, like, Oliver Stone wanted the archival footage to look dirtier. And if there's new dirt from the previous master, it's like even better. And so like our instructions were not to touch that. So like if we ran through AI, it's just going to start cleaning stuff up like that without like director's approval, or there's a lot of collaboration between departments, and just get something to look right. So
that's an interesting note, because I know I've worked on some things that have like archival footage that's been used, but the problem is that the new dirt doesn't look the same as the old dirt. so like keeping new dirt and leaving it still looks like new dirt. Like it doesn't look like it was from the archival footage. It looks like new dirt.
Right.
But for me, I'm like, I as long as it's not fully automated, I'm like, give me the AI tools. Like, it drives me crazy when I see the software. It's just like, I as a human can clearly see that that's dirt, and no matter what setting I set it to, like, it will not remove it. Or there's, things that are clearly not dirt, and it always removes it. I'm like, if you can make the software smarter, please do it. Like, I embrace it, bring it on. But, the problem is like, I think a lot of people are what they want to do is the companies want the AI to make the process faster and cheaper. I want the AI to make it better.
Right.
Like, so if it can do a better job, please, I want that tool. But I don't want it just so I can just be like, point to the file and be like, here, clean that. And then I'll come back tomorrow when it's done. Because that's, maybe that'll happen someday, but that's a long way off. But there's definitely room for AI to improve, like knowing, oh no, that's rain. I know what rain is. Don't get rid of rain, or anything shot outdoors. No, that's an insect. Like, leave that alone. So yeah, like there's definitely room for the software to get smarter. I mean, I think you were asking like, what's a misconception? I think the biggest misconception I can think of is that people do think it's a set it and forget it job.
Yeah.
Where like the software does everything. Like all you need to do is know how to use the software, but the software does all the work. Like that's not really the case. It's a compliment that stings, but when I do read reviews and they say like the element was in terrific condition, I'm like, no, it wasn't. I'm like, yeah, it is one of those jobs where it's like, if it's done really well, you don't know we were there.
Right. One more big thing that I really wanted to bring up that is probably as controversial as AI for many of these people is the difference between 4K and Blu-ray. So many people are looking at these, and if they are attached to Blu-ray, they're saying, you can't see any difference between Blu-ray to 4K. And some of these people are attached to 4K and saying it is light years better than Blu-ray in every single instance, or in most instances at least, and saying if it's not going to be a 4K UHD release, I don't want it. So, Michael...
They're both wrong.
Exactly. When you were working on these, first of all, are you just so damn good at your job that you can tell the difference between a 2K and 4K scan off the bat?
Yeah, for sure. I could see just with the grain profiles, I could realize it does have a sharper image. I think the thing that really made it more difficult for restoration was the HDR grades. Yeah. It really makes like every small little piece of dirt just like stick out. So luckily we have FilmWorks, and that helped me out like a ton. Like there's like no way I could just manually like use some of the like PF Clean to restore something, because it would just take way too long and I'll be going over budget. But that's where the automated tools in Phoenix helped me out with that type of restoration. But I would say the HDR on a 4K disc is probably what kind of is a big difference from just a standard Blu-ray.
I know you got plenty of thoughts here, Craig. Lay it on us.
I don't know where to start. From a restoration standpoint, 4K is superior if you're working from an element that had 4K of resolution to work with. Like people, I see so many projects that are just like, this came from a release print and it was like 4K. And I'm like, well, that release print was probably printed from a dupe negative, which was made from an IP, which was made from the original negative. There's probably not 2K of information on that print. Like, why are you doing this at 4K? The answer to that should be because we wanted to do HDR, because 4K inherently gives you the option to do HDR, because standard Blu-ray doesn't. But I think a lot of people just, and that's been the thing about 4K since it's really come out into the consumer level, is it's easy to market more pixels. Everyone understands 4K is more than 2K. That's easy, very easy to understand, very easy to market. Marketing the fact that the pixels are better, you don't necessarily need more, but the fact that they're better pixels is where the HDR comes in, where like you have such a wide range of contrast of every color. That's really what people are seeing and appreciating. It's not the resolution, unless, you know, if you've got a 4K TV and a big 4K TV and you don't sit too far away from it, you'll be able to see the resolution difference. But what I think most people are really being wowed by is the HDR. And then even HDR, like depending on the project, you know, like I've seen some things where like it looks absolutely amazing. I've some older films that look stunning. I mean, honestly, old black and white films that were restored in 4K with HDR are stunning. If they're done right, you know, don't crush the blacks too much. No, don't make the black super black, and don't like blow out highlights. Like, you know, they don't get blown out. That's the point, I guess, of the HDR, but you know, where they're blinding you, like it still should look like a print. And I think HDR is used as a gimmick like 3D too often. Of like, look what we can do. I was like, yeah, but you don't have to just because you can. So yeah, like when we were doing the color grading on Felly Day, almost the only notes I ever gave Tyler was, "That's too bright. That's too bright. That's too bright. That's too bright." Like, tamp it down. Like, it still needs to look like, you know, 30-year-old animated, you know, analog animated film.
Right.
So, but at the same time, you do, you know, if you don't do anything with the HDR, then like, what's the point? So you got to kind of find a balance there. Yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's complicated, and people don't seem to understand that.
Michael, on that note, as somebody that's working in film restoration, how do you feel about some of these directors that want to go back and fiddle with their original vision or change the color grading of what everybody knows it as, or not even James Cameron? We'll skirt around that because he's a whole different beast. But some of these beloved films that have been out for 40 years looking one way, and now they want to add, you know, a different color palette overall to it.
I think it's great. I see how excited the colors get. You know, they get another chance at it, and you know, been part of those sessions and kind of being a fly on the wall, just kind of seeing how the director was like, "Oh, like I wish I had this technology back then," because this is like for shoot, what was the title? Yeah, well, there was a title I was working on where the director, the grain was so pronounced in the, like, all the dark scenes, and he had to, the way it was like, it was scanned in, it just it was, the blue channel was like just totally distracting, and he wanted to like remove all that. So we went in with Phoenix, and just with the help of the colorist, you know, we got it looking right, and he was like, all right, that's so I wish I had this when it was officially, like when I screened it in the movie theater, you know, like the first time around, and now like he was so happy he had that technology now, and it just, when it comes to something like that, I think it's great. I know like usually the directors are really hands on, and they're not really, I haven't been a part of like a bad color session where maybe something went totally wrong and the fans weren't happy with it. So far, everyone's been pretty positive in the review, like in the reviews, and why it's just been really positive. I haven't seen anything negative come from it.
Nice.
And for people that don't know, when he said the blue channel was crazy, the grain, the film is broken up into red, green, and blue, and the blue is where almost all the noise is.
Right.
And then, yeah, you work on a lot of more newer films, like where directors are still around. Like,
right, yeah,
like most of the stuff we work on, the directors aren't around anymore. And the ones that are so far have been, you know, just like we did Pied Piper was one where the color was definitely considerably different than the way anyone had seen it before. But the way everyone had seen it before, it was really blue. And I'm like, I didn't really have much to go on other than I'm like, I know these puppets were made from mahogany wood. And I know what that looks like because literally my desk I work on is mahogany wood. So, yeah, I just tried to make the wood look like wood. The gold coins look like gold coins, and then see where things fell. And obviously, in that case, the director was still with us, and so we showed it to him. We're like, hey, want to make sure we're going in the right direction, and he was like, He's like, this is the first time it's looked like it's supposed to look. So he was thrilled. But yeah, there's I do understand where, again, it's like there's never and I know people like to have a hard and fast yes or no rule on things, but like everything always is in the gray. So sometimes, a color grade might change, but it could be for, a variety of different reasons, not just like the director just willy-nilly was like, no, I want to change it. I'm like in the case of the Pied Piper, it was like, it was never right before.
Right.
So just because you saw it, when it came out before on VHS or whatever, it doesn't mean that's what it was supposed to look like. Just because you got used to it looking wrong, that's not the way it was supposed to look, There are other times, where filmmakers will just be like, oh, I got another shot at doing this, I want to change it. Which, it's their film. Like, and also, I would like, in a perfect world, you'd be able to release both versions. But that's probably just financially not feasible most of the time.
Right.
And then also keep in mind, like Michael was talking about, like the color grading technology that we're so used to now is pretty new. Like, I think the first digital intermediate was "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?"
Jeez.
Not that long ago. Like, prior to that, most of the color grading a film got was filters at the lab with red, green, and blue. Like, that's it. That's what they had to work with. So the fact that we can fine tune things, and they do it to like, was it like a range of like 50 stops or something, like 25 plus, 25 minus. So like, I remember my IMAX days when because we were working with lab timing, the most common thing that we would hear is -2, okay, +2. -2 in the red channel would make it redder because you're working from a negative. And then, okay, don't change the green, +2 blue makes it more yellow because you just wanted to warm it up. And that's how films were color graded. And you had full stops of color that you couldn't have. Like, you can fine tune things to like the most minuscule amount. And also, all those color grading that was done at the lab, that changed the entire image. Like, you can't just be like, oh, I just want the sky a little different, or I just want the guy's skin tone a little different. Like, you couldn't do any of that. So the fact that some of these filmmakers are like, well, obviously I would have done things so much differently.
Right.
Like, so they given the opportunity, they want to, which makes sense. I do understand from the preservation point, we're like, yeah, but that's not how it came out. Like that. And I do understand kind of wanting to preserve that. So like I said, it would be nice to be able to have both versions on a disc. But that version is preserved. Again, the difference between restoration and preservation, the way it came out originally, the negative is nice and safe in a vault. Like, it's not going anywhere. And if you really, really liked that color before, then buy the previous release.
That's a good call. On that note, we had somebody ask, this is Kid Gloves on Facebook, while restoring, have you ever messed around with, the color grading, different soundtracks, removing grain, other tricks to see what it would look like to modernize something that you're working on?
No. that's an easy one. No.
I figured. Is that something that you even have a desire to do?
No, not really. I want it to look, like I said, I always say, like, I want it to look like it did opening night,
Right.
a show print that was printed from the original negative. Like, that's what I want it to look like.
Any different thoughts there, Michael?
I'm on the same boat as Craig. Like, I don't mess with any of that stuff, or else I'll pretty much be out of a job.
That's a pretty good reason not to do it then. Finally, I guess these are some like rapid fire Deaf Crocodile specific questions. Any hints of future animation releases, or any, are you considering any animated films from China? Two very specific questions we got.
Lots of animation coming in 2025. Lots. Worrisome amounts. I'm like, how am I going to get all this done? Animated films from China, you don't have anything signed, but it's certainly, to say it's on our radar is like, we're always looking everywhere. So there's no place in the world that we're just like, we're not interested in that. So yeah, like if it's a good or interesting film, we're interested. It doesn't matter where it's from. I mean, we don't get a whole lot of flack for it, but like I've seen some comments online, bitching about the fact that we have so many Russian releases, and they're like, yeah, the artists aren't the ones starting wars. it's rarely the artists. Well, yeah, I would love to put out I know there's some really cool Chinese animation. That'd be great.
Next one from Knickknack01 again from the Blu-ray.com forums. I really admire Deaf Crocodile's commitment to making their content widely accessible to everyone. Have you considered including PDF versions of your booklets along with the transcripts that you currently provide?
It's crossed my mind, but there has to be, a decent reason for people to buy the limited edition. like, if you can get all that stuff and just buy the standard edition, it kind of makes people be like, why would I buy the limited edition?
I will throw this out there. Would it be possible to do after the limited edition sells out and add it to the PDF that is hosted?
Yeah, maybe. That's a possibility, maybe. I mean, we did kick around the idea of a pared down booklet, where like the an edited version of the essays or in fewer photos, so you get like a 10-page booklet, or so you have something. But again, that's a lot of work, and we don't have time.
The biggest thing is I know the writers that work so hard on these essays. It would be nice to see those live on somewhere rather than in 1,500 copies of a release that nobody can get ever again.
We've kicked around the idea. I don't know how feasible it is, or how you'd even go about getting it done. But I love the idea of putting out like an annual once a year that collects all of the essays, because the essays are so good. And just have a once a year annual that comes out that collects all of the Deaf Crocodile essays for that year. Like, that would be awesome. I don't know anything about publishing, so I don't know how that would happen, but that would be cool.
We'll talk later. I got an idea. The last thing, all of the questions from social media have been answered. Thanks everybody for the questions. That was a big deal. The last thing that I was going to ask, because I'm kind of surprised nobody asked this, is it's been a year of change for Deaf Crocodile. You went from being distributed by OCN to doing your own thing. How's the process been going elsewhere, and do you feel like this is something that's created a good future for Deaf Crocodile?
Yeah, I think so. We were probably, I mean, I can't speak for other labels, and I don't know what the relationships were. I suspect we were a pain in the ass for OCN. Because we're very hands-on and very finicky about every tiny, minute detail of our releases. We definitely aren't a here's the title, looking forward to it coming out. Like, you know, the artwork, the booklets, the how they were released, like what we could say, what we couldn't say. Like, we were, they were probably glad to be rid of us. So I do like the freedom it gives us to like, you know, we come up with the hard slipcase editions. Like, that's how I wanted to release things all from the beginning. So it gives us so much more just freedom to talk about everything we're working on, because that was another thing. Like, we were not allowed to talk about releases or share things until, like, they had a very hard, like, this is when things are announced and that's it. So yeah, we like doing our things our way, and it allows us to do that now.
Great to hear. I'm glad you've had more freedom. That's all we got. Michael, anything about restoration for film that we didn't bring up that you feel like the people should know?
I think we covered everything. That was a lot of questions, and I don't know if I have anything to add to that.
Craig, anything we missed? Anything about Deaf Crocodile you want to shout out?
No, I want to shout out Michael's brilliance. He comes off as quiet and extremely humble. The dude's a restoration genius. He's really good. Like, he shouldn't be so humble.
Amazing. On that front, this is release day for The Outcasts. For the pre-orders, go out there and pick up the Blu-ray, get it ordered now. Hope you've been checking out some of the back catalog. In just a couple weeks, we will be putting up our next commentary episode. Thank you all for listening, and until next time, we will see you in the next episode.
Are you a film fan who loves the ultimate home video experience? Look no further than The Disconnected. Your host, Ryan Verrill, is your go-to source for the latest and most accurate information on home video releases, exclusive interviews with industry insiders and filmmakers, and has established a thriving community where every film and physical media enthusiast feels welcome. From hidden gems to blockbuster hits, The Disconnected brings you insider knowledge and a welcoming space to share your love of cinema. Watch every Thursday night at 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific for the live announcements show, and follow The Disconnected on social media to stay updated. Subscribe to The Disconnected on YouTube or on the podcast provider of your choice, and dive into a world where every movie night is an adventure.
Thank you for listening. To hear more shows from the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network, please select the link in the description